as I briefly touched on in my little how I got started story at the beginning of this DVD, I've started my business more or less from scratch twice now, once in Northern California and once again in Los Angeles. And I'm going to teach you exactly what I did and how I did it to go from shooting little chump change $100 jobs all the way up to the multi-$1,000 jobs that I'm shooting now. So here you are, and you've decided that architectural or real estate or interior photography is something you want to get into. When you first start, you're going to have absolutely nothing. And the first thing you need to do before you even approach anyone to get jobs is some sort of portfolio saying, I can handle the job that I want to get. The best way that I found to start getting into this type of photography is to approach real estate agents who need better pictures. A lot of agents go through a home using an iPhone or a handheld point and shoot and just snap off random pictures with no thought or composition put into them. I would say the best way to do this is to approach agents. If you go on their MLS listings or whatever program they're using in your country to view listings and approach the agents that is attached to that listing and say, I think I could help you out. I'm trying to get established in real estate photography. Is there any way that I can shoot a listing for you and hone my skills? I'll do it for free. And if you don't like the pictures, you don't have to use them, but it's good things for both of us. It helps me build my portfolio. You get some better images for your listings. Everyone wins. There's really no easy way to get into this other than that. So once you've got one house under your belt, hopefully using the techniques that you learn in this video, you kind of have the ball rolling. The ball's in your court. You can take it and run with it. What you want to do, you've got one house. You can take that listing. Hopefully you did a good job for that first agent and they like your work. They might start throwing you a little bit of cash. You kind of just want to keep building your portfolio. You might want to do 5 or 10 houses for very little money to get started. Now, some people might throw their arms up and say, oh my God, you're working for no money, you can't do that, never, you're killing photography. But the truth of the matter is, in order to break into the industry, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit because agents are notoriously cheap. They're not going to want to pay. You're going to have to fight tooth and nail to get any money out of them. And building a great relationship like that with a couple free shoots as you hone your skills is a great way to get into it. Houses are always being bought and sold from $40,000 to $40 million. And if you can kind of climb that ladder and do shoots for one agent on the cheap end and just kind of build your business and let it snowball a little bit, he or she will refer you. Agents work on a ton of referrals. So you do a good job for that agent. Maybe their friend who's also an agent will say, I need some pictures. Can you recommend anyone? And you say, oh, well, I know this guy, Mike Kelley. He shot 5 or 10 homes for me. You could use him. His rate is so-and-so. He's trying to build his portfolio. He might give you a discount. And there you go. Just one agent talks to another. It's a lot of networking going on in that industry. And once you're in, you can keep the ball growing. So real estate is really one way to get a foot into this industry. And now a technique that you can use to get from real estate into interior design and architecture is by leveraging the opportunity to get into those homes and take some extra time to create the images that you really want to take. What I did, I would shoot real estate and the realtor would open the home for me. I would go in and I would shoot a batch of real estate photos. And then say if I had an extra hour to kill, I would go around and make images that were just for me, such as little details of the furniture and the furnishings, the architectural details. I wouldn't deliver those images necessarily, but I would have them in my portfolio. So if I wanted to approach an interior designer or an architect, I could say, look at these images I took. You don't need to say that they were for a real estate agent because that will instantly scare them away. But you can say, look, I shot this home with great design, and I've got this little, this living room here, and this kitchen from this home, and so on and so forth, shot with an interior design or architectural eye as opposed to a real estate eye. So by taking the extra hour in those homes, if it's available, you'll be able to take those images, build your portfolio not only for real estate, but also for interiors and architecture, and then start marketing to those clients separately. So as you keep building your portfolio, you're going to start getting nicer and nicer houses. And once you're going to find one home that's super amazing. It's just going to be head and shoulders above all the other homes in your portfolio, and that's a job that you really need to nail. That one super amazing house can do so much when people look at your portfolio and see that you can handle not only those small $100,000 homes, but also that $5 million home that a friend of an agent got you to shoot. That can really propel you forward. That will give you the credibility to start shooting the bigger and bigger homes. So it's really it's kind of a snowball effect. You start with the little homes, your portfolio grows a little bit, you might do a couple shoots for free. Agents, the word of mouth spreads, you do a good job, you go higher and higher end, people start trusting you with these big multi-million-dollar listings, and there you go. Now I say that it's really simple, but it might in actuality take you a couple years of grinding to get to that point. It's really tough, but once you start that snowball effect, you can really take it as far as you want. So if you want to take it beyond real estate photography, you can't approach each shoot as a real estate shoot. You have to approach your real estate shoots as if they were an interior design or architectural or commercial shoot. You might need to spend a couple extra hours, and it might be tough to find an agent who will let you do that. But once you start getting them the images they need, they'll be a little bit more relaxed about the time frames. So you can say, oh, I'll be in the house from 1 to 4. And if you can get your real estate images done between 1 and 2 or 3, you have that entire extra hour to just make these killer images, the images that you want in your portfolio that will help you find the clients that you really want to work with. So by creating the images that you want to create, you will find the clients that you want to shoot for. So really the key here is to build your portfolio, and it's going to take some extra hours. You're going to have to put in some extra hours on site and some extra hours in Photoshop. But once you start building that portfolio, you can really expand your client base. Even though you start with real estate, you can take that a step further and go the extra mile for your clients. Even though they might not be paying you for it, but if that's what you want to do, you're going to have to put your nose down and get to work. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, after you've built your portfolio, you've got some killer images together, you might have put in a month or 2 months or 6 months or a year building your portfolio. The next step is to really start marketing yourself if you want to make the jump from real estate to interiors or architecture or commercial photography. And you really need to take some time to get together and make a plan about this. Now, I could go in and spend hours upon hours talking about the business side of photography, but I'm just going to touch on a few things that really helped me out with my marketing. If you want to check this stuff out, there's books that I can recommend. For example, John Harrington's Best Business Practices for Photographers. It's basically my Bible. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff, check out that book. But I'm just going to touch on some examples of what worked for me and what didn't work for me and why not. All right, so I found that the most effective marketing tool that I have is a killer website. A lot of photographers spend a lot of time on their website, but they're doing all the wrong things. None of your potential clients care about how artsy-fartsy your website is. You might have, a real cool minimalist design with the cool side scrolling, and people say, wow, that's a beautiful website, man, but it's not an effective marketing tool. People are inundated with hundreds of thousands of images per day, week, month, whatever. There's a constant flood of images. And what makes your pictures different than the rest? And how does your website say that? So you might have the coolest, most flashy website out there with cool little animations and everything, but I guarantee you that it is not an effective marketing tool. You need a way to show your clients that your images are different, that what you do is different than anyone else, and why they should part with their money and give it to you. So the first thing that you need to do is take a long, hard look at your website, because that is the #1 goal to success in this industry. People are going to be Googling you. Say, I live in Los Angeles. If you search for, Los Angeles photographer, are you the #1 in your market? I mean, granted, it's a huge market. Say you're in, Louisville, Kentucky, and someone goes on Google and searches for real estate photographer in Kentucky. If you're not on the first page, you got your SEO dialed in, you got great content, and you have a great selling scheme, they're going to overlook you immediately. So get rid of the flashy stuff and make a website that is completely based on sales and what separates you from all the other schmucks in your field. So now I've kind of gone on about this, and you might want to know, what about my website makes me different than everyone else in my field? Well, I have examples of what a picture would look like before I do anything to it, which is a single exposure, and then I have a picture of what my final images look like. And there's a little mouse over slider. The clients can go in and say, oh my God. A lot of our clients aren't photographers. They might just see that after that finished image and think that's the way the house naturally looks. But when they see the before image, they can really see how much work and time you put into that picture to make it look as amazing as it possibly can. Don't just assume that your clients know exactly what you can do. You have to spell it out for them. Yet they're going to have tons of questions about your images, about your photography, about you. You're selling your pictures, you're selling yourself, your personality, and you're selling how you can benefit them. Why do I want to give you money? Also on the website, I have an FAQ with frequently asked questions. I get a lot of emails with the same questions, and I find that putting that FAQ on there really helps clients kind of understand the process a little bit better. They might want to ask me why I can only create 8 pictures per day. I'll explain that to them. They want to ask me about licensing, about pricing, and if you have an FAQ there, it's all there for them. And the more you sell, your answers and your questions, you're not some mysterious photographer. You kind of decipher yourself for them. A lot of clients really appreciate that simplicity. The FAQ is one such way to do that. Another thing on your website that is absolutely imperative, and for some reason a lot of photographers don't do it, is a really well-crafted about page. especially in a field like this, architecture, interiors, real estate, whatever, your clients might be spending an entire day with you. If they don't know anything about you, why would they want to work for you? It's like going on a blind date with someone you met on the internet. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to hire someone and not know a thing about them. But some photographers say, oh, all that matters are your images. I completely disagree. You're selling yourself just as much as the pictures. So if you have a great about section, you got smiling pictures of you on there. You give a little bit about your background. For some reason, photographers think that people don't care about who they are. They only care about their images. And I can guarantee you that is not true. It is so super important to have a great about section that explains who you are, how you got there, your credentials, what you know about interiors and architecture, why you love interiors and architecture, and so on and so forth. You don't want to set your client up for a blind online all-day date. So I want to also talk about some other forms of marketing that you may or may not have considered. Now, I also spent a lot of time and effort putting together print marketing, whether it was flyers that I hand out face-to-face, or brochures that I send, or mailing cards that I send, or ads in magazines. Now, a lot of people say print is dead, and it depends on the medium. If you're going around and meeting people face-to-face and handing them flyers, I do not at all believe that print is dead. However, I spent thousands of dollars and countless hours putting together magazine advertisements, and I don't think I saw a single dime come back to me because of it. I don't want you to make the same mistake. Unless you are a large multinational operation with a lot of employees, I don't think that the brand recognition in magazines is worth the price that you're going to pay. I think I was paying something like $2,000 or $3,000 for 4 months of advertising in regional magazines, and no one found me through those. So I would say avoid print marketing in magazines because it's just not where people go to find photographers anymore. Spend your effort instead on SEO, your website, making a great, effective sales website. I also want to touch a little bit about brochures and marketing. I find that the best way to market, in addition to the website, is FaceTime. So if I go around knocking on doors, cold calling, I think that's how I've gotten most of my clients. I will just walk in, especially when I'm starting. When I was first starting, it was all FaceTime. No one knew who I was. I would go knocking on doors, hand them a flyer, and that's how I got my first clients. So if you have the time and inclination to do that, print up some brochures. Not just any cheap brochures on cheap stock. You want it to be so good that even if they don't like you, they won't throw it out. So I would spend $2 to $3 per brochure on full stock, glossy. I don't even know what the technical terms are, but it was like a piece of cardboard, and it was beautiful, full color, glossy, foil stamped, the whole nine. I would bring it around, and people say, wow, these are amazing brochures, and it instantly reflects on your professionalism, your personality, and how well you get things done. So if you want to spend any time and money on print marketing, I would say the best thing to do is create brochures and go around and get FaceTime in with clients. Just look up on Google, local area interior designers, local area real estate agents. Go to them in person. Maybe call, see if you can set up an appointment, tell them who you are, and say, I just want to drop off some materials. No pressure to buy, no obligation. I'm not going to be, a Cutco knife salesman coming in trying to sell you $1,000 worth of stuff. I just want to drop off some information and make that information as beautiful and as good as you possibly can. Some other popular forms of marketing are through email and web services. Things like agency access, vertical response, any of those, email blast services. There's also Google AdSense, AdWords, and so on and so forth. I personally, I've tried a few of them. I'm not a big fan of the email blast services just because in the past 2 or 3 years, email has changed from something that we check when we're sitting at our computers to something that we check without checking it on our phone, so to say. So if you send someone a huge marketing email, they're going to be in their car, walking on the street, out to lunch, and they're going to see it on their iPhone and say, I'm not even going to look at that. Whereas 2 to 3, 5 years ago, whatever, you might have caught someone at their desk and they might have taken the time, but now it's just changed so fast, I don't even think it's worth it. So I think the best approach for email would be to send very personalized emails one at a time. So for example, something that I did with real estate is I would go on the local listing service, whether it's MLS or whatever it might be in your country, and I would find listings with bad photography. I would write the agent directly and say, my name is Michael Kelley. I saw your listing at 735 Golden Sparrow Avenue. I really think I could help you. Would you have any interest in talking with me further about my services? And then you might want to add some attachments and say, like, this is a home that is similar to your home. And here's a comparison of the before photography and the photography after I did it. So it's time consuming and it's soul sucking, but that's what you have to do. You can't just send out these 1,000 email blasts and expect a response because people are just going to flick right through it. But if you find a real estate agent named John Smith and you say, "Hi John, I found you through blah, 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 the MLS listing. My name is Michael Kelley and I'm a photographer. I think I can help you and here's why." A personal one-on-one email is probably the best, most effective way to approach agents via email. Another approach would be to use something such as Google AdWords. I've never been a fan. I just don't really like the whole model. And I use AdBlock. A lot of people use AdBlock. They might not even see them. So I've just steered clear. I never really had the inclination to, click on those ads that pop up at me and say real estate photographer or architectural photographer in Los Angeles. It just doesn't appeal to me. Some people might have had success with it, but for me, I really find that it's not that effective. The most effective marketing, as I will reiterate over and over and over, is in-person FaceTime with a brochure, a personalized email, phone call, etc. I would just steer clear of the Google AdSense if I were you. As of right now, I'm not really doing any paid advertising per se. I mean, I do have people working on my website, but I don't really subscribe to any paid advertising services because, like I said, word of mouth, FaceTime are going to be the most successful ways of advertising in this industry. There are a few other avenues which I found success from as far as marketing go that aren't really that mainstream, but I'll mention them anyway. The website Houzz, HOUZZ.com, is a pretty much one-stop shop for interior designers, architects, homeowners, remodelers. The entire architectural products industry goes there to look at new trends, to shop, to add pictures to their little idea books and portfolios. I would really suggest checking that out if you're interested in marketing to interior designers. It's a huge community. There's also Facebook fan pages, but you have to be careful with those. You have to target them to the right people. If you market your Facebook fan pages to photographers, it's just empty likes. It doesn't matter. I'd rather have a Facebook fan page with 100 potential clients than 10,000 photographers looking at it. So used effectively, it can be a great tool, but if you don't pay attention, it's going to be completely useless. A lot of people ask me about editorial work and the value of that. Now, it's kind of a double-edged sword because these days editorial budgets are so small, but it is a great way to get your work in front of people. Now, I know that a lot of photographers moan and grumble. They don't want to say, "I'll never work for free for the credit," but it does give you a bit of, validation, and it is having your work curated by people, photo editors who know what the current trends are. And so it is a great way to get your work in front of a lot of eyes, and some potential clients might see your images and look for the photographer and contact you that way. But as for me, I've never done a lot of editorial work. I've always been so busy with real estate and interiors and architecture. It's just a lot of inquiries through my website. That's the main way that I do it, but you could travel down that avenue and see if it works out for you. All right, so for this next shoot, we're gonna be shooting for an architect rather than a real estate agent, and there's a lot of differences, and we're gonna slow way, way down. Whereas before, when we were shooting for the agent, we could do 25 pictures in 1 or 2 hours. We could do multiple houses per day. In this case, we're gonna be shooting this one location over 2 days. Now, this house was designed by one of the best known architects in Charleston. It is a gorgeous home right on the water, and it has tons and tons of really cool architectural features going for it. When I talk about architectural photography, there are many different schools of thought. There are people who say don't use any lights at all. You've got to wait for the natural light to be just perfect. And to that I say, well, you'll be waiting all year for one perfect day with the right light. There are people who say, light the hell out of it, make it look as spectacular as possible. And what I want to do here is document the space and make it look and feel just as amazing as it does in real life. When you walk into this space, you say, "Oh my God, this is amazing." But when you see the photograph, I want you to say the same thing. So I'm going to use a number of different techniques. If we had to shoot every room of this house like we did for a real estate shoot, we'd be walking with at least 40 images. But we don't have to do that. We just want to show the house as best as we possibly can. We want the architect to be able to use these pictures in his portfolio for advertising and stuff like that. So it's got to be really the best of the best. We're just going to narrow it down to the best features of the home, the money shot, so to say, and we're going to spend all of our time making those shots as perfect as we can. So this is pretty similar to a shoot for an interior designer, but instead of focusing on the craftsmanship of the building, the architectural features, I might be focusing more on the decor, the interplay between colors and light and shadow, arrangements, and I might bring in some staging. But for this house, like we're really just trying to show the architectural features. It's a very similar process, but you'd focus on different things. The lighting's going to be very similar. And for an interior designer, I would probably do many things very similarly. So it's the same exact techniques, just working on different subjects. So here we are, we're shooting this house for an architect today. The first shot we're going to do is of this beautiful kitchen. I've got the camera over here. As you know, the first thing I always do is find out where I want to shoot from. I'm going to show you the difference between shooting really wide, for example, for a real estate agent, and shooting a bit tighter for an architect. So in this first image, you can see it's really not that bad. And believe it or not, this is all natural light. It looks pretty good. If it wasn't such a high-end job, I'd be okay with delivering this image. But because I'm shooting this for an architect, the budget is there. I want to take my time and make this look as good as possible. That means I'm going to have to do my own lighting. I'm going to zoom in on this shot a little bit because I want to showcase more of the architecture rather than a general view of the house. So here I've zoomed in. I've lost the entire general view of the room, but I feel that it really showcases the architecture a lot better than that wide view where everything is kind of small in the frame. So now let's take a look at my lighting setup. The first thing I want to do is figure out how I'm going to light this. I'm going to look at the ambient image and find out exactly where I want to light. People are often attracted to a light and bright kitchen, so we're not going to go too heavy-handed on the lighting today. The ambient light in this room is okay, but I'd really prefer to use my own light to light the space. So what I've done is lowered the ambient exposure by 1 stop by increasing the shutter speed. The next thing I'm going to do is add my own light to bring back up the exposure. What I've got over here is a single speed light on a stand. The goal with this is to add a light that is similar to the existing natural light, but a better quality of light. So we're going to go ahead and test that out and see how that looks. Now this is an example of hard light. As you can see, there's very hard shadows, bright highlights, dark shadows. It's not really going to work for what we're trying to do. So what I'm going to do is soften that light and try to fill the room with a more pleasing light. So what I've got here is a shoot-through umbrella. I'm going to mount this on the stand, and it's going to completely change the quality of light. So as you can see in this photo, changing from a bare light to a light shot through an umbrella really changes the feel of the light. Instead of those harsh shadows, we've got nice shadows that replicate the natural light from outside. All right, so we've got our soft light filling the kitchen. The next thing I want to deal with is underneath these chairs here. It's gone nearly completely black because of our fast shutter speed. So in order to counteract that, I'm going to take a little small speed light. This is an SB80DX. I'm going to set it on optical mode, quick and easy. I'm going to put this down here with the diffusion card out to control the spill. And that's going to add some light to underneath the chairs. Let's take a picture and see what happens. As you can see, that's just what I needed to lighten it up. It's on a very low power level. I think it's at 1/64th. Just a little touch of light is all you need to bring out some of that detail down there. From looking at this image, we've got some nice light on the left-hand side, but the right is still a bit dark. So in order to fix that, I've got to add some light. So what I've done is taken a speed light and put it up on a stand. I'm going to bounce that into the ceiling. Nice white ceiling here. Won't add a color cast. And that's going to create a nice soft fill on the right-hand side of the picture. As you can see, the shadows cast by the umbrella light over here has been filled in by the bounce light from the right-hand side. Let's take a look at our picture so far. I see one little problem that jumps right out at me. From the umbrella over here is at a relatively high power, and it's casting a little bit of a shadow on these cabinets back here. So in order to fix that, I've got to add some light and bring up that shadow to make it consistent and even with the rest of the image. That light comes right through here, hits the range hood, puts a shadow. We got to fix that. So all I'm going to do, take my speed light, go way down on the stand, hide it behind the counter, and point it up right into that cabinet. Let's take a shot and see how that looks. So this kitchen's looking pretty good. I'll show you an ambient frame to show you how far we've come. But there's one little problem spot that you might not have even noticed, and it's this room way back in here. In order to draw the eye through an image, you need to keep light consistent through the rooms and maybe even vary the levels of light throughout the rooms. That'll keep the photo interesting and show that the room back there isn't just a complete dark hole. So come back here, I'm going to show you what I did to brighten up that room. So to take care of that, it's a pretty simple fix. All I've got is this one speed light, and I'm going to bounce it off the ceiling. Since it's not a major part of the image, just a little touch, we don't need to create the most amazing light in here. Just a bounced light will look natural and take care of the problem for us. So this is one of those times where the iPad really comes in handy. I can test out the exposure and see how it looks, all without having to walk back to the camera. So let's take a look.
and it's looking pretty good. So let's head back out into the kitchen and we'll finish off the shot. All right, so this shot is almost finished. We've got nearly everything in camera, which is great. It's going to make our lives in post much easier. But there's a couple little things that I want to take care of, which I can't get perfect in the camera. I'm going to have to take care of it in Photoshop. And that are these reflections coming off of both this wine cooler and this microwave and oven. So what I'm going to do is have my assistant David bring a scrim over here. And this is going to look different to your camera angle from where my camera is, but I'll show you that in just a second. And what I'm going to have him do is hold this scrim to block the reflection off the window hitting the glass here. So I'm going to go back and direct him and take a shot, and I'll show you exactly how that looks. So here's the two shots with David in the image, scrimming the light on both the wine cooler and the oven. So now I'm going to take you into Photoshop. We're going to add a little bit of polish to this shot, and we'll show you how to finish it off. All right, so here's our kitchen shot. We've got it mostly right in camera, but like I said, there are a few things that I want to take care of, and I'm going to show you how to fix them in Photoshop. Things like reflections, burnt out lights, and errant flash. So what we're going to do is I'm going to find our original finished flash image. This is as close as we got in the field, and open it up in Photoshop. So let's go to Aperture, and we will edit with Photoshop. All right, so let's take a look at this picture real quick and find out what we need to fix. Over here is a big reflection. We can take care of that. Remember, we scrimmed it. I'll show you how to mask that one in. Same thing with the microwave and oven. Over here we have a burnt out light bulb. That's a quick fix. Right up here we've got a reflection from our umbrella in the window in the oven hood, and that's kind of distracting, so we're definitely going to want to take care of that. And right here we've got a little bit of flash leaking from where we lit the back cabinet, and those are all quick fixes. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing we'll do is we'll take care of the reflections in the wine cooler and the oven and microwave. So I'm going to go back to Aperture, and I'm going to find our pictures where we had my assistant David holding up the scrim, blocking the reflections on both of those objects. What I'm going to do is open those in Photoshop. All right, so here we are, and as usual, I'm going to shift-click and drag them on top of the original image. We can close the two images after we're done with that. So we've got this in Photoshop, and I'm going to hide those layers. I'm going to rename my first layer. Let's call that Reflection on Microwave. And I'm going to do the same thing with the second layer. I'm going to rename that Reflection on Wine Cooler. And what I'm going to do, this is super quick and easy. I'm just going to zoom right in here, and I'm going to take my lasso or pen tool, whatever's easier. In this case, I think we can get away with the lasso because it's a relatively simple square object, and I'm just going to drag it out 4 different clicks, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And all I'm going to do on that is click on Add Layer Mask. That will reveal our reflection-free wine cooler. As you can see, there's a little sliver of it that I missed. I'm just going to grab the brush, and I will brush that right out. And that's probably about as good as it's going to get right there. And we'll do the same thing over here on the oven. So I'll select that layer, grab my lasso, and I'm just going to lasso around first the microwave. 1, 2, about 5 clicks around there. And again, hit the Add Layer Mask button. And there's our microwave now free of reflections. I'm going to do the same thing down here. However, there is this little bit of teapot, so we have to take that into account. So I'm going to go around the edges of the oven. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can intersect that teapot. It's easy to fix that. And then I'm just going to grab the brush here. Now that we have our selection made, I can just brush it out. And there we are, removing the reflection on that oven. So I'm going to deselect that, and as you can see, the selection edge goes right through that teapot. Since we still have our brush selected, we can just change to a black foreground color and erase that right out of there. And that immediately gives the illusion that we never did anything at all to that teapot. So as you can see, that was just a quick and easy fix for both of those reflections. And I think that instantly alone makes this image look 10 times better. It goes from pretty good shot to serious professional image right there. You can see all the detail in the wine cooler and all the detail in those nice expensive ovens and microwaves. So there you go, there you have it for that. Now, let's address the other few problems in this picture. Like I said up here, our flash that we use to fill in these cabinets is a little bit of a shadow up top. And all I'm going to do to fix that is go back to Aperture and find one of those images from before where I added that flash, which is right here in this case, and I can open that up in Photoshop. And we're going to do the same exact thing here. We're going to drag that shift-click on top of the original image, and we're going to rename that to Flash Above Cabinets. And all I'm going to do is create a layer mask. I'm going to fill it with black, select the Paint Bucket tool, and make our foreground color black. Fill that in, then select the Brush tool. Make it big and soft. Switch to a white foreground color to reveal what's underneath our mask, and just paint that right out like such. And that is very simple, as you can see, to get rid of that. Now, the last thing I want to take care of here is this burnt out light. And this is, again, a quick and simple fix. So I'm going to make a entirely new layer. And I'm going to rename it. We'll call it Burnt Out Light appropriately. And I am going to come in here with the pen tool. And I'm going to get way in there really tight and make a selection around the edge of that light. And just go all the way in here using our pen tool to get as close as we can. Just the burnt out part, we don't need to do the whole thing. And we'll turn that into a selection by hitting Command or Control Enter. Get our nice dotted lines. Then I'm just going to grab the Clone Stamp tool. And what I'm going to do is grab the light right next to it. And I will just clone that right in on top of the burnt out light. And there you go. We can do a little bit of cleaning up on this. I'm going to reselect it and zoom in. And just grab some of that and kind of paint in that edge. So super quick and simple fix for that burnt out light. And if you zoom out, it looks like we've got everything fixed in this picture except for this highlight up here on this oven hood. And again, very quick and simple fix. Now for every high-end job like this, I'm going to make sure I bracket 5 shots, 2 stops north or south of a properly exposed image. And that's just kind of, a CYA, just to make sure, in case I get into any trouble, I can always grab some of that ambient bracketed frame and brush it in. I noticed on location that we were having some trouble controlling the highlight on that oven hood, so I made sure to grab the bracketed picture. So what I'm going to do is find a bracket that pretty much aligns itself with the exposure of what we've got in Photoshop. I'll open that, and again, I will place it on top of our almost finished kitchen image. And what I'm going to do is, again, make a selection, switch to a black foreground color in the paint bucket, and fill it with black. And all I'm going to do, again, my favorite tool, big, soft brush, and I'm just going to this is 100% opacity, and as you can see, it's kind of ugly looking. It's got that green cast to it. We don't really want that. So all I'm going to do here is go down on the opacity. I'm going to switch to about, let's say, 40% opacity, and I am just going to brush some of that in, but not all of it, so that it kind of covers up that out-of-control highlight on the oven hood. And as you can see, it's gone from a bright white object that instantly grabs your attention to something that you don't really even see. You can take it as far as you want. I'm going to go a little further down there, and that'll wrap that one up. And to be honest, I don't think anyone would ever notice that unless I showed you what I just did. So I'm going to walk through the entire image step by step from the bottom. So here's our original flashed image. The first thing we did was remove those 2 reflections. And there's one on the right and the other on the left. After that, we took care of that flash highlight above the cabinets. We took care of our burnt out light on the left and the harsh reflection on the oven hood. And as always with every picture, the last thing I'm going to do is Command or Control Option Shift E, flatten all to a new layer, Control T, or you can go to Edit, Transform, and Skew. And what I'm going to do is drag up my vertical rulers here and just make sure that everything is nice and vertical. Looks like I can pull out that right-hand side just a little bit. And there's a little bit of barrel distortion over here, so what I'm going to do is go to Filter, Lens Correction, and make a custom selection here, and just go just a bit take out some of that distortion on the right-hand side until it looks about good. And I would say that's it right there. So now I've got nice straight lines on either edge of the image, and our image is done. Now we're going to work on a living room shot of this house. I've got the camera in place and the composition set. I've chosen to shoot this way because I think the fireplace is a great architectural feature, as well as this balcony and the loggia over here. As you walk around a space, you can really appreciate all the things at once. You can appreciate the furniture, the architecture. You can move your head, you can crane your neck, you can see it all. However, in a photograph, you're only in one spot. You can only see one thing. By moving the furniture, that allows us to create a much more interesting two-dimensional piece of art, or a photograph, for example. If I was shooting this for a real estate agent, for example, I don't think I would spend any time moving the furniture. I'd shoot from that angle, I'd shoot from this angle, and this angle, and cover all my bases. But because we're shooting for an architect, we want the home and the furniture to complement the architecture. And by moving the furniture around, it'll be much easier to create an image that speaks to the architect. So we just spent about 20 minutes rearranging the furniture. You can see what it looked like before and what we've rearranged it to look like now. As you can see, it's a big improvement, and everything makes sense in an architectural context. The couches face something relevant. They're not facing off into the distance. We've opened up the fireplace over here, and everything seems to make a lot more sense given our composition. So now I'm going to show you how I lit this shot. The first thing I'm going to show you is an ambient exposure. This is the room as it is with no additional light. It looks okay, but there's, of course, a few problems that jump right out at me. The windows up here are completely blown out, and you can see no detail in them at all. So in order to deal with that blown out window up there, I'm going to dial down the exposure by about a stop. This will darken the room as well. So what we're going to do to counteract that is to add some light. I've got one speed light in an umbrella right here, and another speed light bounced off the wall over here. The reason we're using the speed light in a shoot-through umbrella is much the same as we did in the kitchen. We've got these great floor-to-ceiling windows, and it's throwing a lot of light this way. Our eye can pick it up, but the camera can't. So by adding that one light up there, we're going to create nice directional soft fill light, which is going to come in and fill the room with light. Remember, my exposure is a little bit darker to deal with those blown-out windows. So by adding the light, we're bringing the exposure in the room back up to where it should be. Those lights are both on pretty high power settings. The one in the shoot-through umbrella is at full power, and the one bouncing off the wall is at half power. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and we need to squeeze every little bit of light out of those speed lights. So we've got our ambient exposure. It's looking pretty good. We've got our umbrella firing and our light being bounced off the wall. But there's still a little area that I want to take care of. So I'm going to take my light on a stick, my little speed light with a softbox, and add light to areas such as the fireplace and bookshelves to bring them up to speed.
The flash is set on half power. The camera is set at ISO 250, which is a good compromise between light sensitivity for my speed light and sensor noise. The aperture is at f8, so the scene is sharp throughout, and the shutter speed is 1/20th of a second.
So I finished my lighting, and as always, the last thing I'm going to do is bracket my exposures. And also make note that when I'm bracketing, it's always in natural light. All my lights are turned off. All right, so we just finished shooting our living room, and let's go into Photoshop and start editing. So what I've done is made a selection for you. Here's our base image. This was using our one umbrella fired up into the ceiling here. There's a little bit of a shadow. This had another light camera left providing some fill. In addition to that, I've also gone out and selected a few of these images where I'm walking around with a light on a stick. And that is what's going to form the basis for most of my technique. Here's an ambient frame as well, and a bit of a darker ambient frame. So these 6 images are going to form the basis for this image. And what I'm going to do here is show you the beginnings of the technique, the light painted technique, which so many of my images use. And this is really the most important thing that I do when it comes to giving my images the look that so many of my clients and a lot of photographers really love. So let's go ahead and open these up in Photoshop. I'm going to start with the base image. And once I've got my base image loaded, we'll go back into Aperture, and I'm going to select my 3 light painted images. 1, 2, 3, right there. Here you can see me minimize aperture for you. So here we are in Photoshop. We've got our 4 images open. I'm going to pull out our base image, and I'm going to drag all of these light painted exposures on top of the original. Remember, shift-click, and everything will be perfectly aligned. There's our first one, our second one, and our third one. All right, so there's our 3 images. We're ready to go. So what I have here, like I just said, are our 3 flashed exposures, one on top of each other. I'm going to hide them all and create a new group. I'm going to name this group. We'll call this lights. I'm going to drag those layers into that group, and I'm just going to turn on the first layer. What I'm going to do here is select the lasso tool. I'm going to select the regular old lasso, no polygonal lasso or anything else. And I'm going to set the feather up top here to 20 pixels. That'll give us a nice round edge to work with. And all I'm going to do, it's really simple, but this is basically the most important thing that I do in my work. If you want to get that look, this is what you have to do. I'm going to lasso around the fireplace, which is what I'm trying to highlight here, being pretty generous with it. Select the entire thing, release the mouse when you're back at the beginning. I'm going to come down and click this new layer mask button. That's going to hide me and reveal the fireplace. And as you can see, there's a bit of a halo around it because the light is stronger than the ambient from the frame below it. So what I'm going to do here is change the blend mode to lighten, and I'm going to take a big brush, big soft brush as usual, set the foreground color to black. I'm going to kind of paint away that excess light until what we're left with is just the fireplace being illuminated. What you can also do is go bigger with it and create a nice natural glow in that whole area. I kind of like the look of that. It pays to experiment a bit. So there's our light painted fireplace, and above that I am going to turn on the next layer, which is me lighting this table down here. Here's another way to do the same thing. I'm going to click on new layer mask before I even lasso it, and then I'm going to fill the entire layer with black, which will hide everything. Again, I'm going to change the blend mode to lighten. I'm grabbing a brush here, soft big brush, set the foreground color to white to reveal, and paint back in some of that light. It's just a tiny kiss of light in here, but it's enough, as you can see, to bring out some of the wood grain and highlights in that table. So it kind of lifts that whole area. It looks okay without it, but when you turn that light on, it just looks a lot better. And the third thing I'm going to do is turn on the light back in here for this cabinet. And again, a different technique to do this is to Alt or Option click, depending on Mac or PC, on this Add Layer Mask button. That will automatically fill it with black. You can see me in there. I'll fix that in 1 second, so we'll hide that for now. And I'm going to go to white on my paintbrush. And again, I'm just going to kind of paint in that glowing light effect. And so what we have now is the mask revealing the lit layer underneath it. So we change that to lighten as usual, and we'll back out. And there's a couple things, like you noticed, here's me very faintly outlined here. So this is in the first layer. What I'm going to do to clean that up is change to a black brush and just brush myself out. Pretty simple and straightforward. So what you have now are 3 different light hotspots, all of them added one at a time: fireplace, table, bookshelf. And there's a couple distracting little things that I want to take care of. The light from the bookshelf here is casting that reflection on the side of the fireplace. So I can select that layer, go to black to hide what's underneath it, and I'm just going to paint that right out. That gets rid of that reflection. And as you can see now, we're looking pretty good. I'm going to rename these just for organization's sake. So we'll call this bookcase, and we'll call this table, and we'll call this fireplace. So there's our 3 little pools of light we have now added into our image. And that is really what's going to form most of my technique. So that's pretty cool, but the image isn't completely done yet. What I'm going to do is add in a couple other layers. I have some ambient frames and what those are going to do are add a little bit of natural feel and glow to this image. So as I mentioned earlier, I used an umbrella aimed into the ceiling, which kind of cast a little bit of a shadow up there. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to bring back some of the natural feeling into this room. So let's go back into Aperture and grab an ambient frame. So as you can see here, this is ambient only, no flash, no light painting, no nothing. It's just a camera on its own. We're going to open that up in Aperture. And again, shift-click, drag that on top of all of our other layers. I'll move it up here so it's off our light group. And I'm going to rename that Ambient. And now that you can see the difference between this ambient ceiling and the flash ceiling. So the ambient ceiling has a really great feel. And you can see in here there's some nice natural glow from those lights. And you get these nice highlights from the light coming in that upper window there. It's a pretty cool part of an image, which we lose when we turn on the flash layer. So all I'm going to do is Alt or Option click this Add Layer Mask button, which, as I said, creates a new layer and fills it with black so that we can't see anything. Select a big soft brush, switch the foreground color to white to reveal, as usual. And I'm going to start painting in that ambient ceiling. And you can see this glow coming back, that great natural glow that we lost when we flashed this room. I'll go all over here, and I'll go up in here. And you can start to see how the difference becomes apparent when I turn that off and turn it back on. It's a much more pleasing and inviting ceiling than the flashed one. And I'm just going to do this to taste, so I'm going to kind of vary my opacity on the brush and paint in and out. It's kind of green up there. I don't want to go all the way ambient, so I'll kind of work that in as I see fit. And let's see what else. I can hide this. If I shift-click on the layer mask, I can see what else it will look like if I delete, or if I just hide everything else. So you can flip back and forth and add ambient appropriately. I like down in here, I like a little glow coming out of those hallways. It kind of gets rid of that flash shadow. And it kind of gives it a warm, airy, inviting feeling. I'm just going to brush it in until I think it looks good. And again, this is one of those things that you can just play with to suit your taste. And that looks about good for ambient. I think I'm about done adding it. And as you can see, I can hide that. And it's not the biggest change in the world, but it does have a really nice effect on the natural light in the ceiling. That warm glow, these lights all come to life. And in the back two rooms here, it's a little bit more natural feeling. So that about finishes the image. What I'm going to do now is just do my typical vertical adjustments. I'm going to create a new layer, flatten all to a new layer. So that's Command or Control, Option, Shift, E. I'm going to drill that into your head by the end of this tutorial. And as usual, I'm going to drag out some rulers and make sure everything looks straight and true. As you can see, there's a slight bit of tilt to it all. So I'm going to skew and drag out the bottom and bring the top in just a little bit. I can zoom in to check my work here. Looks like I got to drag the bottom out slightly over here. All right, and that about finishes that picture. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go back to Aperture to apply the last adjustment, which is a crop, because I feel that there is a significant amount of dead space at the bottom of the picture. So all I'm going to do is just crop this. I usually like to crop my verticals to about a 4:5 aspect ratio. And we'll bring that in right to about there. I don't feel we're losing anything important by doing this. It's just wood floor and some carpet. And crop the image. And now, as you can see, here's our beautiful finished image. And now, what I want to do is compare this to our first test shot. So we spent a lot of time in this shot, not really even photographing it, but rather moving the furniture around. And that is such an important aspect. When you find the best spot in the room for a camera, it might not be the best spot for the furniture in regards to the camera's positioning. So let's again take a look at all the furniture we moved and compare that to how that looks to this new shot with all the lighting and the furniture moved. And I think you'll agree it's quite an amazing difference. We took this room from a boring, pretty standard snapshot, and we spent 20 minutes moving furniture. Granted, we had a whole team of people. And it really, really made this room come to life. So when you move the furniture, you find the right camera position, and you light it just tastefully enough, you can have an amazing shot. I've spoken with the owner of this house, and he told me that this house is valued at $4.5 million, and most of that is because of this view right out here, which you probably can't see because that camera is being shot without any lighting at all. So what I want to do here is capture this bathroom, the feel of the bathroom, the mood of the bathroom, and that view out the window all in one shot. A lot of my shots take a lot of post, but for a shot like this, it's something that we can definitely pull off without ever having to get in front of the computer. So the first thing I want you to do is take a look at this shot that I've exposed for the room. This is what the camera thinks is the correct exposure. You can see detail and everything, but obviously there is no view whatsoever. And there's not a whole lot of contrast. You've got that light blasting in the window, it just kills all the contrast in the room. So now I'm going to take a shot and expose just for the view. Take a look at the two shutter speeds here. When we expose for the interior, we're shooting at 1/10 of a second. When we expose for the view, we're shooting at 1/160th of a second. That's at f9 ISO 200. Some people might say, well, why don't you just composite two images? Take one for the interior, one for the exterior, and cut them out, paste them together in Photoshop. That won't work. If you look at this window, you'll see how the light just overexposes and completely blooms around the edge of the window. You'll never get a crisp, sharp picture. And this bathroom is made with really high-end furnishings, great lines in the countertops. We want to show it's a nice, crisp, clean bathroom, and a muddy image like that just won't do us any good. In this image, I attempted to manually bring back the view in Photoshop. You can see how unrealistic this looks and how different the white balance is in the foreground compared to out the window. In this shot, I've taken multiple exposures and combined them in Photomatics to create an HDR image. It's better, but I still think it looks a little cheap. And here's a shot that I got totally in camera using 4 strobes. The image looks much more realistic and it required no post-production. Let me show you how I pulled this one off. The first thing I'm going to do is open up this shade, which is going to allow some more natural light to come in. Now I know you can't see it in that camera, but what this does is add a bit of mood and feel to the image. You've got that great afternoon sunlight streaming in, and that's definitely a pretty cool feature of this bathroom. So what I'm going to do now is expose for the view and the natural sunlight coming in. And after that, what I'll have to do is raise the exposure of the interior using flashes to balance it all out. The first flash that I'm going to be using is going to be bounced into this corner. We've got a nice white ceiling, don't have to worry about color casts, and it's going to fill the room with soft light. The second flash I'm going to be using is going to be in the same spot on the opposite side of the room. There is one small difference though. I'm going to be using that on a slightly lower power level so that the light still has some feel and direction to it. Alright, it's starting to look a little better in here, but the bathtub is still dark. This whole alcove is still dark. We got to bring that up. So what I've done is I put another speed light on about 1/8 power down in there just to spray a little bit of light up into the ceiling and fill that spot with light. So after those 3 lights, there's still one more area that's completely dark, and that's this attached shower area. And to remedy that, all I did was bounce one more light into the ceiling. Like I said, the light here doesn't need to be very compelling. We just need to show that there's some detail in here. There's a shower. The viewer will understand that. The light doesn't need to be incredible in here, so one bounce light is all we need. As I've said multiple times, I love Photoshop and I love the art behind Photoshop. However, sometimes you're on a job and you know you can get it all in camera and save yourself some time in post. This is one such example, and it's a really big time saver when you're able to get it all right on site. You can go home, just run it through a couple adjustments in Lightroom or Aperture and be done with it. All right, so I'm going to take a minute here to show you one of my favorite pieces of gear. Now, when you're shooting real estate, architecture, interiors, whatever it is, there's a lot of places where you need to hide lights, and a light stand won't really fit there because maybe the edge of the camera frame is there. You don't want to get feet in the shot. It's in a really tight little space like a bathroom or a bedroom, and you can't afford to have one of those huge light stands in the way. So what I've got here are these Manfrotto monopods, and what they have on them are the little tripod feet on the bottom. Yep, I'll collapse it so you can see what's going on. It's got the mini tripod feet on the bottom, and that stands on its own, for example, on this dresser, on a kitchen counter, on a bathroom counter. You can hide them in between doorways. On the mantle right there, you can fit it. Pretty much everywhere a regular light stand can't go, this little guy will fit. You'll be able to hide your lights right up against the wall. Great for bouncing light, keeping the light stands out of the edge of the frame. So if you're going to do this, I highly recommend you invest in a few of these. I think I got 3 or 4, and I could not do my job without them. So in that last master bathroom shot, I showed you how to expose for the exterior and light the interior to match. Now that works in a lot of scenarios, but in some situations, your lights might not be powerful enough.
We're in the master bedroom that's attached to that bathroom, and we're having a little bit of trouble. What I've got going on is my speed lights are not powerful enough to bring up the interior to match the exterior. So what I'm going to do is show you how I can overcome that with just one quick and easy Photoshop fix. So what I'm going to show you is what it looks like with both of my flashes on full power, my ISO at 400, my aperture at f8, and my shutter speed right below the sync limit. If I go any faster, I'm going to start to get black bars, and we can't have that. Alright, so just like the bathroom, I'm going to take a picture that exposes for the window view, and what you'll see is that the view looks great, but inside it's completely black. So the first thing that I would go to do is, of course, turn my flashes on. But like I said, there just isn't enough power in those two tiny speed lights. Sure, we could bring in some big packs and heads, but we're trying to move quick, and we don't need to spend an hour setting up lights for this tiny bedroom. So as you can see in this shot, exposing for the view and flashing at full power with two strobes looks pretty bad. So now I'm going to show you what happens when I slow down my shutter speed, let those windows blow out, and let that natural light wash in. As you can see, the room starts to feel a lot better. There are no hard shadows from the flashes, and there's a nice soft light coming into the room. Because there's more natural light coming in, I can kind of ease up on the flash power and remove some of that white, bright light from the scene. Alright, so now the room looks great, but the windows are blown out. And you might say at this point, okay, take your shot that you exposed for the windows and just cut and paste them in. You know, go around each window frame one at a time, and sure, you can do that. It's going to take forever, and it's going to look a little bit ridiculous, because if we zoom in all the way here, you can see that there's a bit of a halo and fuzz around each of the windows from that blown out light coming in. So what I'm going to do is show you one quick and easy way to take care of that. You'll have nice sharp windows, and you'll have to make one selection in Photoshop. That's it. Not every window, just one big selection, and you're done. Alright, so to make these window frames look good, all I'm going to do is take my flash off this dresser right here. Alright, I'm going to walk over, and I'm going to adjust my shutter speed and aperture so that the exterior is properly exposed. So I'm going to go to 1/160th, we'll go to f9, ISO 200. And what I'm going to do is aim this at the entirety of the window frame and fire my camera. And what that is going to do is just light that area of the window. So in Photoshop, I'll just be able to take my lasso or pen tool, make one square selection around the window, mask it in. That way you get a perfectly lit window frame and a perfectly exposed exterior. And that's how you combine the beautifully lit ambient interior with the perfectly exposed exterior with sharp, clear window frames. Now before I start with Photoshop, I want to mention that I'm going to be using Aperture for a photo cataloging and library system. Now you may use Aperture or Lightroom or Capture One or Bridge or any of the multitude of programs that are out there, but it is important to have one program so that you can view and quickly flip through your pictures in some kind of system that makes sense before you open them in Photoshop. It doesn't really matter what you use. Like I said, Lightroom, Aperture, they're all pretty common programs, Bridge, Capture One, but it is pretty important to be able to look at all your photos and line them up and say, here's what I'm going to use when I start compositing. So that being said, let's go ahead and start editing this bedroom image. This is an image where I'm going to show you a quick and easy technique to get perfect windows in under a minute or so in Photoshop. So the first thing that we're going to do here is I'm going to show you the three images. This is the properly exposed bedroom interior with our two lights. And this is the exposure in which we expose for the outside of the view here. So here's inside, outside. We want that view with this interior. Now, what you could do is you could open these two photos in Photoshop. And what will happen is I'm just going to stack these on top of one another really quickly like this. And as you can see here, they're perfectly aligned and ready to go. Now, what you could do is a number of things. You could spend, all this time going like this around each little window frame and then making a mask out of it, and on and on and on until you got the proper exposure for each of these window panes. And that would take a lot of time. So if you were to use a normal lasso technique, what you could do to get this all in is just click, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so times around the edge of the window and create a mask from that. You'll get the view, and I'll brush away some of this so it looks a little better. You'll get the view, but the edges of the window frame are going to be completely dark and underexposed. Now, you could spend a half an hour going around here and getting it exact, and it's going to look a little rough around the edges. So what you can do is my little technique here with the flash on a stick. I'm going to open that image up here in Photoshop. And what that is going to do, I'm going to lay that right on top again,
and I will get rid of our dark layer here. We can delete that because we're done with it. I'm going to turn back on our flash on a stick layer. And if you notice, the flash is properly illuminating the interior of that windowsill, and it's also allowing us to expose for the exterior. So what I can do here is now take the lasso, and I'm just going to be super quick and easy here, a little bit rough and dirty. 1, 2, 3, I'll go down 4 or 5 or so clicks, and then I'll kind of roughly trace up the edge of the curtain back to the beginning of the lasso tool. And then all I'm going to do with that is I'm going to click on this new layer mask button right here, and that will reveal the flashed window frame that we just selected. So after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to make it black and white, the default colors. You can hit D for default there, and we'll start painting away our mask. So what I'm going to do is set the brush to black, and with a soft, large brush, I'm just going to remove that underexposed layer. And as you can see, that took me about 15 seconds, and that was very, very rough and easy. You could refine this a bit to get it just perfect, but that looks about 1,000 times better, and that took under a minute in Photoshop. All right, so let's take a minute to talk about daytime exteriors. A lot of clients want these, real estate agents, architects, you name it. And the process is pretty simple when compared to those sexy nighttime shots. So what I have here, I've got my camera on a tripod as usual, got the house lined up, and I kind of used an app called Light Track to find out where the sun is going to be at a certain time, so I can come out here and get the shot. And what we've done is, as usual, camera ranger attached to the camera here, and all I'm going to do is bracket 5 shots. Got one that's going to be properly exposed, 1 stop under, 2 stops under, and again, 1 stop over and 2 stops over. So let's talk a little bit about what I mean when I talk about a proper exposure. Now, when I'm shooting this exterior, obviously I want to make sure there's detail in both the shadows and the highlights. But in a situation like this, it's going to be pretty tough to get it all in one shot. So for my base exposure, that is the exposure that I'll bracket off of 2 stops up and 2 stops down, I'm going to look at the histogram and at the LCD and make sure that the histogram, the curve, is right in the middle, and I've got detail throughout most of the house. So if the sky's a little bit blown, and the grass or the shadows are a little bit dark, that's okay, because we're going to bracket and be able to brush those in Photoshop after we take the shot. So let's take a second here and talk about the composition. Now, the most architecturally interesting part of this house is the whole front entryway. You've got these beautiful gables, this nice little turret here, and this really cool brick walkway that leads into a courtyard in the middle. That's what I'm really going to focus on here. To the right, there's a garage, but it doesn't really speak to me. There's nothing super interesting going on over there. And to the left, we've got another wing of the house, but again, there's no really important details over there. We can back up and take a really wide shot just to have it, but for this money outdoor shot, I'm really going to focus on the central area of the house. So for this shot, I've actually zoomed in and cut off a little bit of the house on either side. You can tell that there's a garage there, and you can tell that there's a wing of the house there, but we don't need to show all of them. We can just imply that they're there. So just like when you're shooting interiors, you can go too wide. I'm at about 30 millimeters right here, and if I was at 17, sure, I'd get the whole house, but there would be so many details lost because the frame would cover so much. Take a minute to figure out, walk around, and find out what's really important in the composition and focus on that. So when you're walking around doing these exterior shots, also be sure to keep an eye on natural things that can help the composition. For example, there's a tree branch that comes down right here and it fits perfectly between the gable and the turret. I've decided to use that tree as a compositional element to add a bit of natural feel to the image. Also be sure to pay attention to what's going on around you with regards to sun and cloud. As you noticed in this interview, every 2 to 3 minutes these big puffy clouds are blocking the sun. We keep going from sun to shadow and back. So if the atmospheric conditions are correct, take a minute and wait for the light to change, as it will drastically affect the mood of the photo. You might like either option. Let's talk about settings real quick. When you're outside on a tripod in the day, you can get away with ISO 100, f8, f13, right, a small aperture. We're not using lights, so we don't have to balance, we don't have to worry about that. Like I said, it's pretty simple, low ISO, small aperture, get everything in focus. Right here, I have the 24mm tilt shift with a 1.4 extender, so I've got a bit of zoom on there, not super wide. And for this shot in particular, I am 1/125th of a second, f9, ISO 100. So let's look at a single frame out of the camera. If you're on a tight budget or timeline, this might be perfectly deliverable. Bring it into Aperture Lightroom, bump the shadows, pull down the highlights, add some contrast, send it off, and you're done. One quick way to really improve those images though is by masking in the over and underexposed brackets. I'll show you how to do that in Photoshop. It's really quick and easy fix. All right, so it's time to go into Photoshop and work on our front exterior shot. Now, what I have here, as I just explained, are 3 bracketed images. This one is a little bit underexposed. The house is a little dark. The sky looks pretty good, but the grass is dark too. And then right next to that, we have the properly exposed house. The house looks good. The highlights are preserved. The shadows are preserved. Then we have the overexposed house. The sky looks like it's about to get completely blown out. And the leaves are a little bright and so on. But what I'm going to do is show you how to basically make an HDR that's better than an HDR relatively quickly. Instead of loading 3 images into Photomatix or whatever your HDR program of choice is and having the computer think for you, what I like to do is load them manually into Photoshop, and then I will actually combine different highlights and shadows from different images to make my own HDR where I have control over every little bit of the image. All right, so here's our images in Photoshop. And I'm going to drag them, shift-click, drag onto one another, close the ones that we're not going to use. And I'm going to hide all the layers that we're not going to use. So I'm going to double-click, unlock my background layer, and I'm going to name it Underexposed. Then I'm going to reveal the next layer, and I will name that one Overexposed. And then the final layer, I'm just going to rename Middle. So what I'm going to do is put our middle exposure at the bottom and hide the 2 other layers. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm probably going to want to get detail back in the sky. So I'm going to turn on our overexposed layer, and I'm going to add a layer mask to it and fill that with black. We're going to hide the entire thing. So if we disable it, you can see it's gone. Enable it, there's our mask. And what I'm going to start to do is kind of just using a large soft brush, I'm going to trace the roof line of the house, bringing in that nice blue sky. And you can see that the trees were kind of blowing in the wind. It's not a big deal, because as we reveal the entire sky, everything lines up and there's no ghosting. There we go. And I'll come over here. And that's a little dark, so I'm going to kind of back off of that just a smidge. Right in here. And there's our sky that comes in. And is there anything else that's a little bit hot that I want to take care of? No, that looks pretty good. I might go a little bit onto the roof here and tone that down. I'll just make a quick selection around this eave part of the thing here and draw that. Just like that, and then I'm going to tone that down just a little bit using white to reveal. All right, that's looking pretty good. And now the next thing I'm going to do is bring in our overexposed frame and turn that on. And again, we see detail in this overexposed frame that we did not see in this underexposed frame. For example, right in here around that bush, we can now see some detail. So what I'm going to do is, again, add a layer mask and fill it with black, and I will start to reveal areas of the picture that I want to have a little bit more light on them. So like around this bush, I'm going to try to bring some light into there, and down in here is a bit dark, so I'm going to lighten that up a little bit. And let's see, go back in here, and in this whole entryway area, looks very dark, so I'm just going to brighten that up so you can still see some shadows in there. We're just bringing detail back in. A little bit right there in this window, down in here. And again, it's a large, soft brush so that our tracks are pretty much covered. And if I hide that, you can see how those underexposed areas kind of come to life a little bit. And then what I'll do from there is I'll zoom out and I'll say, that's looking pretty natural and pretty good. I'm going to just add a little bit of contrast. I'm going to go to curves. And then I usually use a linear contrast curve for these outside exteriors. You don't want to add too much and kill the blacks again. And then again, I will just mask it out of areas where I don't want the blacks to go all the way dark, like in front of this tree here. So I want to keep my detail throughout. All right, so after I've got my image together, my faux HDR here, the last thing I'm going to do is hit Command or Control if you're on a Windows machine, Option Shift E, and that flattens all the layers to a new layer, so that I can drag out my rulers and check my vertical lines. And it looks like they're pretty good. It might be off just a smidge. So I'm going to do my little skew and drag that corner out just a bit, make it perfectly vertical. And I'll hide those so you can see. There's the before and the after. We've got a nice blue sky and detail in all the shadows. And that is a quick way to make an HDR that isn't really an HDR. You have control of every step of the process. Just to show you guys, I went ahead and threw these 3 images into Photomatix using the Infuse engine. And this is what I came up with. I played with the sliders a little bit. I don't claim to be any kind of HDR expert. But that's as good as I could get it, and I wanted to show you so that you can compare a manually done HDR in Photoshop, like I just showed you, to one that is automatic and the computer is in charge of the process. So I really like doing it by hand a bit better because you retain all of the natural contrast and colors, and the HDR tends to muddle the grays a little bit, and doing it by hand just completely avoids all those problems. And of course, you get more control over everything. So that is my method for doing that, and hope you learned something there. So here we are on this really cool screened-in porch area. It's very unique to this house, and it's got a lot of features. It's got the great fireplace over here, a fully functional grill and oven over here, and it's just a really, really cool space. I could totally see someone out here in the afternoon sunlight enjoying reading a book or coming out here for a barbecue. Super versatile, a great spot to have in a place like Charleston where you're going to have a lot of indoor, outdoor activities. So I could shoot this like I shoot any normal room. But since what I want to do is really show the mood, character, and feel of this room, I'm going to use one pretty simple lighting trick that most people don't even really think about. What I'm going to do is put a light outside, and I'm going to fake some sunlight coming in the window. You can do this in really any room, but I find it works best on spaces like this. These light and airy indoor-outdoor spaces can really benefit from adding your own sunlight. So like every other shot, we have to find the best spot for the camera. And like a couple of other shots I've shown you, the furniture might not be in the best place for the shot. So what I've had to do is come in and take a couple minutes rearranging the furniture. I repositioned the couch, lined up the chairs just the way I wanted them, and now here we are. We're ready to take the shot. So the real important features of this room are obviously the view. We've got a gorgeous view over the ocean here. We've got a great fireplace, floor-to-ceiling woodwork, so I've chosen the camera location based on that. I'm shooting at 24 millimeters because it's kind of a small room, which isn't ultra-wide, but wide enough to get all the features that I want to show off. So it's time to start lighting this room. I've chosen my base exposure based on the fact that I want a little bit of that bright, soft light coming in to fill in the shadows of the room. Now, it's still way underexposed in here, so what I've got to do is add light. The first thing I'm going to do is add an umbrella way up high up here as a big source of fill light. So I've got my umbrella here. I'm going to put the flash on quarter power. We'll take a test shot and see how it looks. As you can see, by putting this light here, we've added a little bit of even soft light to the entire scene. There's still a bit of work to do, but that's a good base point. The next thing I'm going to do is add a light camera right. Because it's a little bit dark over here, I want to add some more fill. So what I'm going to do is bounce the light off this white wall right here. All right, so I've got my speed light here. I'm going to bounce it off this white wall. It's the trim of the door here. The reason, like I said, I'm not bouncing it off the wood is because I don't want it to pick up that color. So I got lucky, found this white piece of wood, and that is going to take care of our bounce and fill for us. So now I'm putting 2 speed lights. Both of them have grids on there. You saw me put one over here on the right and another one to the left. And what those are going to do, I've just aimed them so that they add a little bit of a specular highlight and some shape and definition to the tops of the chairs. Like you saw in that picture, the light was a little bit flat, so I wanted to add some more separation to the furniture in the room. Both of those are on very low power, 1/16 and 1/32 respectively. So let's take a shot and I'll show you the difference. Again, it's a very minor change, but it's those little things that are going to make your images stand out from the rest. So that's looking pretty good. Now, a lot of people might say, this looks pretty done to me, but I'm going to do one more step. And like I said, it's one super easy trick that will really take your images to the next level. I'm going to put a light outside, and what that light is going to do is imitate the sun. So we have taken this dull time of day, I think it's like 4 p.m., it's hazy, it's kind of gross out, and what we're going to do is create some sunlight. I got an Einstein. I'm going to raise it way up on a stand and blast it in through the window. And what that is going to do is just replicate the effect of a sun streaming into this room. It's a sunroom. It's a screened-in porch. You want to have that mood in the photo. It's going to go such a long way to making this a great-looking room. So this is one great reason why it's important to have not only speed lights, but 1 or 2 big lights in your bag as well. In addition to that, it's probably worth it to have a pretty tall stand. I think we put this up at about 10 to 15 feet, and you want to make sure you can get plenty of angle coming down to replicate the sun. All right, so I'm going to have my assistant aim the light out there. Let's take a test shot and see how it looks. So the first shot we took here,
We put the light out and up to about direct camera left. Now, the sun's coming in this way. It looks pretty cool. It's a big improvement, but it's not exactly perfect. I want to get more of a sunlight feel. I think I can control the light a little bit better and have a more impactful image because of it. So instead of having our sun come from left behind the camera, what I'm going to do is move it around so that it streams across the top of the furniture and the floor. Having it at a more oblique angle to the camera will light the room differently, and it will give more of the effect that we're after. So as you can see, I think that's much better light placement. When it comes across the top of the furniture, it really adds to the mood, whereas before it was just kind of focused on the fireplace. And you really want to show it on the floor, on the furniture, how it interacts with the shapes in the room. So I think this image might be pretty close to done. But the more I look at it, the more I realize I might want to warm that light up a little bit. It looks a little bit too cool, a little bit too flashy. So what I'm going to do is just put a 1/4 CTO gel right on the head of that flash. That way I've still got a nice, normal white balance for the room, but the sunlight coming in is going to look like it's a sunrise or sunset color of light. That'll add a little bit more mood, take you one step further to get into that image you have in your head. All right, so for the filming of this DVD, I left my big gels back in Los Angeles. We're here in South Carolina. We had to improvise a bit. What I did was I took 4 or 5 gels from a pack I had for speed lights. We taped them together and taped them over the reflector of that flash. Now, a little improvisation like that can go a long way. So now I think this image is done. We've got great feel, great mood. We've got that sunlight coming in. Everything looks good. The only thing I might change later is that I might mask in some windows to preserve the view in Photoshop. It's not that complicated of a fix, and I've already shown you how to do that. So if you want to do it, feel free. It's kind of a matter of taste. I personally am a fan of blown out windows. However, in this case, I think it's really important that we do, in fact, mask in that window view just to really show every cool aspect of this room.
So here we are in Photoshop. We've got our ambient light only shot in Photoshop. This is from the sunroom there. And here's our shot using only the flash, and here are our exposures for the windows. I'm just going to show you real quick how I blend these 3 pictures together. Really quick and easy fix, and I'm just going to improve it a little bit. Now, if I show you this shot, I think it is for the most part deliverable to most clients, but me being me, I'm going to make it just a little bit more perfect, and I'm going to do a little work on it, some quick fixes to bring it up to speed and make it as good as it possibly can be. So the first thing I want to do is I think I am going to add in a little bit of this window view. I like it being bright and airy inside, and I like that we can't see everything outside. It's not dark. It doesn't seem unrealistic. But what I want to do is just bring back some of the view. So what I'm going to do is something very similar to what I've already shown you before. I'm just going to select the windows layer here and grab my lasso tool, make sure my feather is at 1 pixel, and I'm just going to drag my lasso around the window frames just like this, and then as you have seen me do 10 times at least before, I'm going to hit the Add Layer Mask button, and I'm going to do that for all these windows. Now there's only 5 or 6 windows that we have to do, so we can do it relatively quickly. All right, so there are the windows masked in from the darker exposure. As you can see, outside is a little bit darker, but I don't like the feel of it. I like the light, airy feel from before. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and command click on this window mask, and all I'm going to do here is take a big soft brush, set it to black and maybe 50% opacity, and kind of paint back in some of the brightness. As you can see, I'm just kind of picking and choosing where I want it to be bright and dark. And that looks good. Like I said, I like the bright, airy feel inside, and having a completely masked out window kind of defeats that. So just going back in and kind of brightening it appropriately. So there's our window view. And now it's not so dark that you see everything, but it's dark enough that you get the idea that there's an awesome view out there. And so now what we have is our flash frame here with the windows somewhat masked in. As you can see, that's the difference that it makes. And then there's one more thing that I'm going to do. I have this ambient layer down here. I'm going to drag it to the top. And there's a couple things I like about this ambient layer. As you can see, without the light, it's pretty ugly. There's a nice green cast up here. There's no real direction to the light, not a lot of mood. It's just kind of flat in general, but there's some cool things, like I said, in this picture. So I like the natural light on the wood up here from these skylights. I like some of these natural shadows down here and on the backs of the chair. So all I'm going to do is Add a mask to it, and I'm going to fill it with black. So paintbrush tool, you can hit G or click over here and make sure your foreground color is set to black and fill that whole thing with black. That will hide it all, and we're going to take a brush, make it nice and soft, set the foreground color to white, hit X or click over here, and I'm going to go to about 30 or 40% opacity and just start painting in some of that natural ambient frame to bring back some of the natural glow interior feel. So I'm just going to go around and go down there, get rid of some of that flashy highlight, and maybe go a little more up here. Because like I said, I really liked that sunspot up here from the skylight, gave it a really great natural feel. But I don't want to go overboard and take away all that light that we created coming in the window. So all I'm going to do is just a little bit of this work, and I think that's all we're going to need. As you can see, it goes from a little bit flashy, but still pretty good. And then as soon as we add that ambient in, it gets rid of that flashy feel, but still keeps all the best parts of the flashed frame. So what we have now is our finished image. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly check the verticals, make sure everything is straight. And it looks like we're pretty good on that front. We got it nice right out of the camera. So that would be our finished shot, guys. There it is. As you can see, we'll break it down again from the beginning. Here's our flash only frame. Then our windows are added in, and then we add a little bit of ambient. And that's the entire image from start to finish.
You've done your marketing, you've done some website work, you're starting to get jobs, you got your portfolio, and now you go into a job, you meet the client there, you're going to be with them for 2 to 3 hours or 4 to 5 hours or all day. It's important to keep in mind that you have to keep your client entertained. Even though you're keeping focused on the job at hand, a really important part of that is being personable to ensure that you gain repeat business. You want your clients to have fun when they're working with you. You don't want to just let them work on their laptop all day and be alone or on their cell phone. It gets a little awkward. They don't have a good time. If you're not very personable, they're probably not going to work with you again in the future. I will bring food, I'll bring coolers of food, I'll bring grapes and hors d'oeuvres and all kinds of different things. I want to have a conversation with the client as we're working, just to keep it light and keep ideas, freely moving between us. If there's this silent, awkward, kind of weird tension, no one likes that. Maybe I'll bring some music. I have like an iHome, iPod player thing. Put on some, maybe like some Pandora, like an easygoing listening radio station like classic rock or something. That really lightens the mood and kind of gets everyone's creative juices flowing. You got to keep in mind that they don't want to be sitting staring at a wall for 8 hours as you work. You have to keep them engaged and ask them their thoughts. And now it's definitely easier with some clients than others because they'll be going through and touching things and you'll be sharing feedback. But some clients, they expect that you know everything as the photographer. You're the professional. And while sure, we definitely should know a lot, we definitely don't know everything, and we're going to want their feedback. And keeping the mood light is just one way that I do that. I mean, you kind of got to judge your clients. I've brought wine to shoots from some of my more fun clients, and they love it. They eat it up. We have a great time taking pictures together. It's always a good time. You can definitely bring some food, crackers, snacks, granola bars, so everyone's happy. Feel free to buy lunch. It's business expense. Take them out after for dinner. So in addition to that, another thing I want to touch on is differentiating yourself from others in the field. So other guys, they might be great photographers, but they might be terrible to work with. If you can, like I said, entertain your clients, keep it light, keep it fun, get the images delivered on time, obviously make the pictures as good as you possibly can, you'll gain a lot of client loyalty. You'll differentiate yourself from others in the field who just kind of show up and shoot and get the job done. Don't talk to the clients, don't have fun, don't engage them on a one-to-one level. So if you can really take that to the next level, I will guarantee you that you will separate yourselves from other photographers that they've worked with in the past, and that's one way to ensuring a great relationship and a long-lasting, loyal client-photographer relationship, so to say. All right, guys, so we've talked a little bit about marketing and business stuff. I want to talk about professionalism on the job. One thing that I see over and over with photographers is they land a job, but they don't know how to act when they get there. Like I said, I like to keep it light and entertain my clients and keep it fun, but at the same time, I'm obsessed with professionalism. Everything I do, from the way I dress, my emails, the way I send them, I keep it completely professional. Even though I like to have a good time, I want to have the facts laid out in a professional manner. I want to give off the appearance of a well-seasoned professional, all that stuff. You cannot skimp on any of this. Professionalism is probably one of the most important things in running a business, and being more professional than the other guys is going to be a big help when it comes to this stuff. All right, so if you get into this genre of photography and you start shooting the higher end homes, like the $1 million, $2 million homes, or you shoot, the high-end design, the architectural stuff, first and most important thing is after you've confirmed the shoot and the location, you want to show up on time. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who are late. And even though I might be there 15 minutes early, if the client is late, that's okay. It doesn't matter. As long as you were there before the client, or you're there 15 minutes before you agree to meet the client, it's just it's not an option. If you have got to be there on time. I've worked with so many assistants and so many photographers who insist on being 5 to 10, 15 minutes late. I don't know why, but it's just one of those things that will separate you from the others. In addition to that, you gotta dress nice. When you're shooting these expensive homes or these expensive projects, people are going to judge you. I don't care what you think. If you think they shouldn't judge me on the way I dress, they should only judge me on my images. It doesn't matter. People are going to judge you. Put on, at the bare minimum, collared shirt, nice pants, nice shoes, no dirty shoes. If you walk into one of these crazy houses and you step on a $10,000 rug with dirty feet, you're gonna look like an idiot. So get your stuff together. Like I said, you can iron your shirt. You can make sure your hair is clean, make sure you've got, you obviously don't want some crazy BO going on. Be professional, have your clothes together, look nice. Like I said, people are gonna judge. And having your appearance together, people won't only think that you look nice, but they'll also reflect on your business skills. You'll have it together. You'll be on time. You dress nice. Therefore, they'll think, oh, he must answer his emails courteously. He probably runs a tight ship with his business, and so on and so forth. People will judge so much based on your appearance. And it is a little bit annoying, especially more so for people who are in big cities like Los Angeles or New York, where appearance is an important thing. But no matter where you are, you really need to have that completely on lockdown. Show up on time, be dressed nice, be ready to go, have all your gear working. Just a little stuff like that will take you from Joe Schmo photographer who does it as a hobby to professional photographer who always has it together and knows what's going on. Another thing that's important worth mentioning is that even though you might be at the home alone, I've shot a lot of projects where it's just me and the building. You want to make sure you go through and turn off everything that you've done. Anything that you've moved, I keep a little checklist on my iPhone. If I move a desk, I square up a desk. I move a carpet, and I'll say for each shot, I moved the desk, 20 degrees to the right or 2 feet to the right. Make sure you push it back. You want the space to be exactly as you left it. I learned that lesson once the hard way, and I will never forget it. It was a crazy big job, and we kind of went through and we did a less than stellar job of putting things back to where they were, and I got reamed for it. But it's one of those things I learned once, and I will never do it again. So every shoot, take a note of all the things you moved, all the lights you've turned on, all the water that you've turned on, everything, and make sure that when you do a final sweep of the house, you not only get all your stuff together, but all of the client or homeowners or building managers or whatever, everything is turned off. The water's turned off. The lights are turned off if you turned them on. The chairs are put back in place. Everything should be exactly as you found it, if not better. One other important thing to note is that when you're shooting a home for a designer or a real estate agent or an architect, a lot of them are new constructions or a lot of them are vacant. And if you have to go to the bathroom, this is pretty funny / embarrassing, but always, always, always check that the toilet will flush before you use the toilet. There are horror stories, friends of mine who have gone into a house and gone to the bathroom only to discover that the water has been turned off and they have to go to a convenience store and buy 6 bottles of Aquafina and flush the toilet using that, just because you can't leave a house after you've gone to the bathroom in it. And that could be a total nightmare. So that is one thing that is definitely super important that most people would never think of. Another thing that I do that I think separates me from all the other photographers is after every job, I will send a personalized thank you note, handwritten, none of this email crap, saying thank you for the job. I really appreciated working with you, even if they were a nightmare client. And I find that in this digital day and age, that goes so far. I thank my mother for getting that in my blood. But if someone's giving you hundreds or thousands of dollars, the absolute least that you can do is tell them that you had a great time, it was great working with them, and you're very proud of the images you created. with a handwritten note, it goes so much further. I mean, even when I get a handwritten thank you note from someone, I'm a little bit taken aback. I'm like, wow, they really went out of the way. They really must have enjoyed that shoot. It goes both ways. I've had clients say, thank you so much for the beautiful pictures. We really appreciate it. And I can say with certainty that I have booked jobs just because the client saw the level of personalization that I gave them. And of course, it takes a little bit of extra time. It's kind of a pain in the ass to go to the stationery store and get some nice cards and write them out, find the client's address. But it's just one of those little touches that I do that really takes my work to the extra level. Even for a $200 cheap little job, when I was first getting started, every client would get a thank you note. And now even all the big jobs, every client, they get a thank you note. Thank you for your time. I sent one to the homeowner. Thanks for letting me into your house. To the designer, your designs are beautiful. Thank you so much for letting me work with you. It's so on and so forth. It's just one of those things that I do. I think it's absolutely imperative that you do it on these bigger jobs. No chapter about the business of architectural photography would be complete without touching base on pricing and licensing. It is a complex, multi-layered subject, and I'm just going to try to give you as much information as I can because I get emails all the time from photographers asking me, how do you price your work? How do you price one picture? How do you price one twilight picture? How do you price for real estate? How do you price for design? And there's so much to take into consideration, so it's quite a daunting topic, but I'll cover as much as I can for you. So when I first started out shooting real estate, generally what I would do is I would sell a project by the square footage of the house. I would say, 0 to 2,000 square feet would be $300, and 2,000 to 4,000 square feet would be $350, $500, whatever dollars. And I found that it was kind of unclear. There would never be a set number of pictures. It was always kind of different. There was no rhyme or reason to it. I just kind of was like an off-the-cuff thing that I thought up real quick, and it only worked for a few months. What I soon discovered was that the best way to price my pictures was per image, and I figured that out a few years ago, and I've done it that way ever since. So, and of course, it's different for real estate versus interiors versus architecture and so on and so forth, and of course, the client's needs have to be taken into consideration. So let's just start with real estate. The best way to price the real estate pictures is I don't really worry about licensing for those. I have a little clause in my contract that says these are only to be used by the agent, non-transferable. If a new agent wants to use them, they've got to pay me to relicense. But they're good for the life of the listing, and they are, you can use them to market the listing. You can market the agency, use it in agency advertising, and so on and so forth. I generally don't want to worry about licensing with real estate agents because a lot of them don't really get the whole concept. Most real estate agents have never dealt with commercial photography on a larger scale before, so once you start talking about licensing, they kind of get a little scared off. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you mean. I would just keep it simple and easy, because one way to scare off clients is to get really complicated with licensing. And so for real estate, just give them a set rate. Say you want 10 pictures, charge them X dollars per picture. It might be 30, it might be 10, whatever you're comfortable with. And that'll be the end of it. Hopefully, they're not going to be used in national advertising, so you don't need to chase tons of money for these. Just keep it simple and keep it easy, and everyone will be happy. The main reason I don't like to deal with licensing for real estate is because just the nature of real estate listings. They're only going to be used once to sell that house at that period. Once a new owner moves in, there's new furnishing. They might sell it in 10 years. It's going to be almost a completely different home in many cases. It's just easy to do one and done. You don't need to concern yourself with multiple advertisings in multiple countries and magazines and so on and so forth. So I would just recommend you forgo any crazy licensing speak. You might want to put something in your contract that says these are only to be used by agent A for this period of time or for this listing. But other than that, you don't need to get overly complex with it. So real estate is pretty simple when all is said and done as far as licensing goes. Like I said, it's not the biggest deal. You don't need to concern yourself with crazy licensing terms. But let's talk about some more complicated licensings, such as images that I would create for interior designers or architects. Now, that is an entirely different ballgame. In many cases, an interior designer or architect will hire me to create an image that might be used for advertising and promoting that interior designer or architect. In other words, these are commercial images which have a much longer shelf life, and they will probably be used for years to come in many types of media in many locations. So in order to get more money for those pictures, you're going to have to charge a little bit differently. So for a lot of you guys just getting started, a day rate or set flat rate might make a bit more sense than licensing your pictures. However, as you start to take on more complicated jobs and your work starts to have more value for other clients, you're probably going to want to start getting into licensing your images. Now, I could go on and on and on, and there are entire books dedicated to figuring out and talking about licensing of your images. But let me just explain to you why the licensing business model is probably the smartest way to go when it comes to trying to sell your images for commercial use. As you start to take on bigger jobs and people start to use your images for commercial purposes, there's going to be a lot more value attached to your images. Like I said earlier, a real estate picture might only have a shelf life of 2 to 3 weeks or even a month. And that is not going to continue to make you money on and on and on. But if you're shooting for a hotel or an interior designer who uses your pictures in an advertisement, the pictures that you take for them could have the potential to land them tens of thousands or even millions of dollars in business in the long run. And you definitely want to see a piece of that because you are the one who owns the images, you are the ones who created the images, and because they have more value to the client, you deserve more money for taking those images. Now, something that I would do is if I am approached by an interior client or an architect client who wants to use a picture in an advertisement, I'll find out what they plan to do with the images and how long they plan to use them for and where they plan to use them. I will then calculate a licensing fee per year based on their expected usage. And what I'll do is, people say, oh, it's so complicated to keep track of licensing, might as well not even do it. Right there on the shoot or in the email as you work it out, I'll go into my iCalendar or iPhone or whatever and mark a date a year out and say, let's renew licensing for the ABC XYZ hotel. And that way, if they want to continue to use the images, and hopefully they do, I can have an easy way to track them down. I'll put their email address right in there, the date at which the licensing expires, and I can say, hey guys, a month ahead of time, your image license is about to expire. Would you like to renew for another year? That's just one fail-safe way to ensure that you get paid over and over and over for the images that you've created that have a huge value to some of these potential clients. Another thing to keep in mind is that by retaining the ownership of the image and licensing it instead of giving them away, you're able to take an image for an interior designer and possibly sell them to the hotel in which the interior design was taking place. Or, a great example here, I recently shot an office building, and it was for an architect, and what happened was the contractor saw the images and wanted to purchase them. If I had given the ownership of the images to the architect and said, here, you hired me, we're done, the images are yours, yada, 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 I would not be able to relicense those pictures to the contractor. So I was able to nearly double my income by doing little to no work just because I was aware of licensing and ownership of images. So rather than giving your images away, but by retaining copyright and using a license-based system, you're able to take one image and sell it to multiple parties. That way, a lot of people are using your images in many different forms, and you're getting multiple income streams off of one image, hopefully for many years to come, because they will want to continue using the great images you've taken to market their product. So there are many different ways to take care of licensing, but the further along and more successful you get in this industry, the more you're going to want to nail down a licensing system that works for you. Whether it's putting a calendar on the wall and renewing licensing that way, or putting the date into your iPhone and reminding your clients. But licensing is one way that you can really make a lot of money from your images, money that you deserve because people are using your images to make a ton of money, we hope at least. And that's one way to just keep tabs on all your pictures and make sure that they keep working for you, even if you're not having to go out and chase gigs to get that money. One of my favorite things about licensing is that even if I'm not working, I could be out of work due to an injury. It could be on a little dry streak. Sometimes jobs come and go. It's the ebb and flow of the game. I still have income from licensing from jobs that I've taken in years past coming in that I can count on. So, for example, if I shoot a project 2 years ago and they want to relicense the images, I might not have shot at all that month. I might be out of town on vacation, but I can follow up with that client and say, hey, do you guys want to reuse this image next year? And they say, of course. And it's some income that I can count on for many years to come from jobs that I've shot in the past. It's just a great way to keep ensuring that your photography keeps working for you, even if you're not actively shooting.